Right. Hi everyone. This is Jason here from Nathaniel School. Welcome to this live stream if you're watching on YouTube, and also welcome to all the people on Zoom through our Patreon and through our subscribed students. Welcome to all. So in this music lesson, what I thought of doing was something I don't do very often on YouTube, at least, is just a simple music theory lesson. Not too much of piano, just music theory. We pick a scale and we just dive into a bunch of simple but very important concepts which can help you through playing existing music which you're trying to learn. It can help you through playing your own compositions. It can help you to improvise and also practice and rehearse with other fellow musicians. And also give you options, give you harmonic options. The lesson is primarily on harmony, chords, chord formation, and I will try and go as deep as I can with the time that we have, which is about half an hour of a window. So we'll pick a scale, look at all the chords, look at how you can quickly build chord progressions. I'll also try and tell you how they sound, and if at any point you have any questions, whoever's watching the live stream, you can shout them out and leave them in the comments, and I'll be happy to go through them. Right? Before we get started, it'll be great if you can see those links in front of you. If you followed us, it'll be great. If you haven't, please do. There's Instagram, where there are some quizzes which happen quite frequently, and we're doing more these days. And subscribe to our channel if you're watching. That'll be great. There's also a bell which you could turn on that helps you get regular notifications, because we do a lesson every week. We do 3 lessons every week. We do a riff every day. So it's good to hit the bell as well, if possible. There's also a Patreon page where most of the lessons and the notes which supplement the lessons, sometimes the MIDI files whenever possible, will all be uploaded there as a post. So as a member, you can always get subscribed and you'll see all of those things, and you'll get an email whenever a new video and thus a new post reaches you. For instance, this lesson, all the notes which we'll do will be put up on the Patreon page, so you can check it out there. So Patreon will be something you can consider. Subscribe, and Instagram for quizzes and stuff. Let's get cracking. So the job today is how to form diatonic triads, and we'll try and go a bit beyond that. How to link and connect chords with each other, that's functional harmony. Then how to build melodies using chords. How does a melody and a chord come together? See, these are all the questions we ask. If I have a scale, what are the available chords? That's what the diatonic triads are. Now that I know what the available chords, I have to ask, how do they work with each other? How do they come together? Which chord goes after what? Which chord comes before what? And so on. Chord trees will be a question where you say, I have a melody and I don't know and what chords go with that melody, or what chords will go with a single note, so that could be very helpful. Cadences are a way actually primarily for your ear to figure out chords. Sometimes we put too much of stress on ourselves and say, oh, I need to learn that chord. I want to know if it's G major or F sharp minor. Rather than that, if you hear 2 chords and if it's a sound you're familiar with, that is what we call as a cadence. It's musical punctuation. So the entire story builds around these small cadences. Now, you can also have some fun with chords. You can have chords which are, some of which being outside the scale, and then they go back into a scale. So that's where we have secondary chords, we have borrowed chords, we have a few other concepts like the tritone substitutions. We use the circle of fifths sometimes. I don't think we'll have time to go anywhere there in this lesson, but I'll try and give you a few of these newer concepts as well if you're new to theory and stuff like that. Right? So the assumption, if you're watching this lesson, I'm sure you know what a scale is. So today we'll do the chords of a major scale. And what better scale to start than something other than C major? So let's see. Let's do G major for today's discussion, and it'll get quite interesting. So if you have a book, the ideal thing to do while you're watching this lesson is to get out a book and write stuff down, because most of the times when you learn chords, you need to write things down. That's what a lot of my music teachers and general teachers in my school generally got me to do. You would have written about thousands of maths problems in algebra, thousands of equations. So you would have written the same thing like so many times. That's why you know it so well. It's the same requirement with theory. So let's just write down the G major scale. What's nice is write it down in a circle, because this helps you to really form your triads quite easily. So I've written down G major in a circle. Just for your information, you could look at the key signature. The key signature we say is 1 sharp. So what is that 1 sharp of G major? We have it as F sharp. This is what it's notated there. And incidentally, G major is, by notes at least, it has the same notes as a E minor. So when we are composing music, if you want it to sound sad, you just get or use the chords of the minor scale, of the relative minor. But if you want like a more positive vibe, then you tend to go to the major. So these two scales have the same note, so they will also share the same chord family, so it's useful to know. Okay, and then you bring them and you put them in a group. Music theory generally tells us in a major scale you have 3 kinds of chords. You have the major chord, you have the minor chord, and you have the diminished chord, or rather chords. There are quite a few of these chords which exist in the scale. So you'll have major, minor, diminished, and in the scale there's a certain degree which you have to remember. So why I wrote it in a circle would be, you can find the numbers easily and you can also build the triads easily. So in a circle you have G, B, D. This is how you form a triad. And primarily the reason why we use triads in the first place for harmony is because a set of seconds are not so good as a pair of thirds. So this is a pair of thirds, this is a pair of seconds. So with seconds, that's G and A and B, B and C. So we usually don't like to start with that, because I'm sure you'll all agree it doesn't sound so harmonically pleasing at your first attempt with harmony, you know. So you want something normal, you want something to sound good. So that's exactly what thirds do. So you have thirds. Now if I look at my circle, you skip one, play one. So G, B, skip one more and play that, and you got yourself a triad. A triad means 3 something, so in this case 3 notes, but don't let that stop you from forming another third. So you could do G, B, D, F sharp, you can start from A, you get that A, C, E, which we'll call something, it's called A minor, and then you add that top note. And if you want, right now I don't have an extra finger, but if I use the other hand, like that, you can keep adding thirds. So what's interesting is if you add it from the dominant chord, from the D, you can actually play all the notes of the G major scale in thirds, and it sounds quite beautiful. It resolves back. So that's just something you need to know. If you play all the notes of the scale like that, it sounds very horrible. I mean, it sounds too chaotic and confusing. But if you space them in thirds, it sounds really usable. By that argument, you could even use fourths to connect harmony. You could do more on that later. And the circle of fifths. I don't want to talk anything about the circle of fifths in this video or in this lesson, because I've done enough and more of it. I'm going to take a break or a hiatus for it for at least a month, and then I will do one more video on that circle. I just keep doing stuff on that circle, and I'm always excited to share findings on that circle. So anyway, so the G major scale has these sets of chords, and it's good to remember the formula. You have 1, you have 4, and you have 5. So the general logic behind writing Roman numerals is you use a capital letter for major, you use small letters for minor. So if you're looking at minor chords, you're going to do small 2, small 3, small 6. So you got that? So if you're writing a major chord, capital Romans. If you're writing a minor chord, small Roman. That's pretty much the deal. And then you have your diminished chords, which is the small Roman and a degree sign. That's the way we write it. And just to add one more chord to the party, which you may not find in the major scale, the augmented chord. So that will take a capital Roman numeral and then add a plus to it. Okay, a plus. So how do we break this down? Capital Roman for major, small Roman for this thing minor, small Roman with the degree for diminished, and big Roman capital with the plus for augmented chords. The formula for an augmented chord is 1, 3, 5 sharp. You get this chord in the harmonic minor scale. You can check out my lessons. Just type minor, harmonic minor on our YouTube channel. You'll get enough and more stuff on this augmented chord. Okay, so this Roman numeral system is very powerful. Just to give you something a little off topic, let's say you wanted to play the B flat major chord and you're in the G major scale. Now in theory you can't do that. Let's first write down the available chords of G major very quick. So your 1, if you see, G, G major, 4, C major, 5, D major, then your 2, A minor, 3, B minor, 6, E minor. That's your relative. And then the 7 is going to be our F sharp diminished. So these are all the available chords of the G major scale. This is what is there in the scale. But that doesn't tell us what is there in the key of G. So there's a huge difference here, guys. So there's the key of G and there's the scale. The scale is G major. G major is 7 notes. The key is just G as the tonal center, or as we say in Indian classical music, the sa or do in various other conventions. So this is the reference point for every sound you hear. So let's say I want to play a B flat, even though B flat is not here. The question is, why can't I? Because you can argue you're in the key of G. Yes, G major is what you're using the most, but you're in the bigger world of G. If you want to go out of your neighborhood and do something cool, go out for an adventure, why not? You can still come back to your good old neighborhood. So G major is the scale and the key, which is that good old neighborhood kind of area. So the pros and cons are there of staying in that territory. The pros are you'll be safe. You're always going to make music which people kind of appreciate. The general public will like it. It's pop culture which will use pretty much only these chords. In fact, pop music filters it out even further. They'll go 1, 5, 6, 4 and ignore everything else itself. So that's another debate on its own. So what we try to do is, when you're learning theory, it's always giving you the opportunity to know what's normal, what everyone use, and then try to figure out not the unknown, but things which a small fraction of people can discover if they want to leave their neighborhood, right? So that's what this class is about. We'll talk about the standard stuff and we'll see a little bit how we can go outside and come back inside. Why are we doing all this? To make chord progressions. Why do we make chord progressions? To make melodies. So most melodies happen only because of chords. You can't really expect a melody to just flow like that. Yes, a melody could have a pattern. It could be supported by a drone. But most modern music these days really needs chords. Otherwise, the melody won't manage at all. So anyway, these are the chords of the G major scale. What I was saying a little bit back was, let's say I wanted to add a B flat major just for fun in this song. So let's say, now what do we call this? The official way of calling this is it's a major chord, so capital 3, but then it is a flattened third. So we prefer to call this as 3 flat, because with respect to the tonic, with respect to G, this is the 3 flat. So you may want to use this. You could even consider like a 6 flat. So what is the 6 flat? G, A, B, C, D, E. So that's going to be E flat major. Right? Now you normally in the G scale you have a 4 major. You could consider a 4 minor. So you do a tiny Roman 4 and you can squeeze in a C minor. The question now is, how do you actually use them? You can't just randomly bring it in. So that's where we have cadences. Cadences will allow you to play chords within the scale as a collection. It will also allow you to play any chords out of the scale as well, as long as you have a way to go back to the tonic. That's the key. So what I'm here to tell you is, yes, we are in the scale of G major, but we are also in the key of G. So for me as a composer, that tends to give me more opportunities. If I say I'm in the key of G, I can do anything. I can do a lot more things rather than if I were in the scale of G major. The scale of G major gives me 7 notes. The key of G gives me 12 notes. And so many intervals. Agreed? Okay. So let's now that we've looked at the chords, another nice way to write this down would be in a line, which I'd highly encourage. You can write it down like this: G major, A minor, B minor, C major, D, E minor, F sharp diminished. Now here's where things can get a bit interesting if you want to go beyond this. Remember what I said a little earlier. I said I can do G, B, D and I can add another third. What's that next third? F sharp. Okay, G, B, D, F sharp. So a nice practice would be to write down the notes maybe like this. Okay, and this bigger chord, let's just write down all this stuff: G, B, D, F sharp, A, C, E, G. That'll be it's a minor bass with a G, then so B, D, F sharp, A, then C, E, G, B, all through that circle which I wrote earlier. You're just using the same circle. Then we have D, F sharp, A, C, then E, G, B, D. These are what we call as 7th chords. 7th chords go beyond the triad. And then F sharp, A, C, E. And then of course it repeats. How do we name these chords? We have a convention. So we have G major 7th. You're just adding the 7 there. Some people symbolize it with a triangle. So you can just say G triangle. Then you have A minor 7th. Or some people will say -7 like that. A minor on top and 7 down. Then you have B minor 7th, which is, you can do like this or the minus sign. Then C major 7th. So that's C major 7th. The 5 chord becomes a D dominant 7th. So that's represented with a D7. You have just a 7 letter there. And then you have E minor 7th, which is that. And the last one has a very interesting name. We say F sharp minor 7th flat 5. Because if you think about it, this would have been F sharp minor. Now you're flattening the 5. that's minor flat 5 and the minor 7th. Okay, and the intervals which are used here are pretty much, see, the major 7th uses the major 7th interval at the top, then you have the minor 7th here, minor 7th here, major 7th here, this is your flat 7 at the top, again minor 7th, and then again minor 7th. But here, this one with respect to that is a tritone or a diminished fifth. So these are the intervals. So in a sense, the chords are named sort of after the intervals which they form. Okay, so we conveniently call these as 7th chords. So what have we started with? We started with existing chords, the diatonic triads as we call them. Then we expand them. So these are the available chords. You need to remember 1, 4, 5 is major, 2, 3, 6 is minor, 7 is our diminished chord. And if you're building 7th chords, this is what tends to happen with 7th chords. With 7th chords, first of all, a 7th chord has 4 notes. A triad has 3 notes. So when do we use 7th chords? Well, for things like blues, jazz, and for more sophisticated chord work. Like if you wanted to play, you know, a G major chord like this, you can make it more sophisticated by doing, it's still the G major, but I'm adding the major 7 there. So if I take like a simple melody with triads, and if I color this with the 7th, kind of colors it more. And what I really like is that extra note inspires the vocalist, or you could be the vocalist and the player. It inspires the melody writer to have that additional note, that additional color. Otherwise, the singer is hearing the triad. Now he or she will just have access to those 3 notes. So your singer will be like G, B, or D in the melody. But then what if you want to promote this note for them? Play it. F sharp. La da 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 da. Or the singer could be clever enough and assume that note. You know, it depends. There are some singers who know their chords better than the average chord player, which is piano and guitar. I know a few singers like that. So, okay, so we've covered triad formation, we've covered 7th chords. So we haven't really seen how these chords connect with each other. How do you go from this chord to the next chord? So a standard tool which musicians use is what we call as functional harmony. So functional harmony basically shows you the function of the chord. Is the chord stable? Then we tend to call it as a tonic chord. Is the chord slightly unstable? We tend to call it a predominant chord. Or is the chord quite unstable? It's almost like a magnet waiting to be locked to something, you know. So you can kind of put an arrow like this and say, okay, the dominant wants to go to the tonic, because that's what it does. The pre, for the most part, will want to go to the dominant, and in some cases it could even go to the tonic, but for now I'll just leave it with those arrows right there. And the tonic chords we have in music are the 1, the 6. When you're doing a tonic as 6, you could also argue, oh, we've gone to the respective minor or the relative minor. And for some people, 3 as well. 3 is a questionable tonic. Sounds very brave and very uplifting. So sometimes I may not want to call it a tonic, but it's generally called a tonic chord because it shares the same notes. As you can observe, the tonic chord tends to have the most stable notes, or at least 2 of the most stable notes in the scale there. And of course, the major 1 has exactly 1, 3, 5. The 6 has what? It has this thing. It has the 6, but then it also has the 1 and 3 scale notes. The 3 happens to have what? It has the 3rd, the 5th, and one more note, which happens to be the 7th. So if it has at least one of these, we prefer to call that as tonic, just to have a nice grouping. Predominant is what? We either say 2 or the 4. If you see, they have very common notes between them. They tend to use the 2 and the 4 and the 6. The 2, 4, 6 seems to be there. So I guess you have at least 2 of those guys in there. Okay. And last but not least, you have the dominant chords, which are 5, or you have the 7 diminished. Another nice way to look at this, if you think about it, 5 plus 7. I'm just adding up the notes of the 5th chord and the 7 diminished. You actually get a bigger 7th chord. You get this 5, 7. Just to prove it to you, in the G major scale, what is your 5 chord? G, A, B, C, D. So that's D major, D, F sharp, A, plus what? What is the 7 diminished? F sharp, A, C. So the resultant is what? D, F sharp, A, C. That's the idea. So you could say 5, 7 is your actual dominant chord. You can always play the dominant chord as a 7th chord. That'll be nice. And the tonic you could play as this, this, this. So how do you make chord progressions like this? Staring at this, it's quite simple. You can just look at a set of chords and try to land on the tonic and follow the stability of these chords. Like for example, well, we don't care how we start. Let's say I want to start with the 1. Then I want to go to the 6. So in both aspects, these are very stable chords. Now I want to create a sense of instability. Maybe a 2 minor. And then end with a 5. We could do stuff like this. Why does this work so well? This is tonic, tonic, pre, dominant.
In Atlanta, giving
right?
Most of these
Tonic,
numbers look
tonic, pre, and dominant. Tonic, tonic, predominant. So what happens here is tonic, E minor, A minor, D, 7th. So if you spell out the chords, you're going to do G, E minor the 6th, A minor the 2, this minor, and D or D7th at the end. So this forms a fairly useful chord progression, or rather a very useful chord progression. It's really, really popular, this one. So here we go. I'm using inversions, by the way, for piano players watching. That helps me change easily. It inspires a melody. It's almost like a melody waiting to be born. So that's your palette. That's the information you have for your melody. So functional harmony gives us this tool. It allows us to link chords really well, and we take the concept a little forward, or very forward, using cadences. And as I keep saying this, you can be rest assured that almost all these topics have been covered in YouTube videos. May not be in that much detail, but definitely in our classes. If you do any of our theory lessons at the school, we will pretty much use one entire lesson on each of these topics, or sometimes more than one lesson. We may need to spend like 4 or 5 lessons on functional harmony, because what I tend to do with these chapters is I'll play you a few songs And I'll show you, oh, these guys are using that cadence, these guys are using that chord progression. It's unfortunately not possible to do it in a YouTube lesson, because I think we've tried this a couple of times and the video has actually been taken down whenever you play an existing song which has copyright protection. So I'm not going to do that. So this video can then be available to whoever's watching it later. So cadences. Cadences is a very tiny chord progression. Again, I've talked a lot about it on YouTube and in the regular classes we have. So cadences is just 2 chords or 3 chords which you need to learn very well and figure out a way to connect a melody around that. So I'll just give you a few of them. We have a 5 going to 1, very common cadence. We have a 4 going to 1, again very common cadence. And you can also alter the 4. You could say, oh, I'll write the alterations later, hang on. Then you have pretty much anything ending with a 5. Now the anything, I don't want to leave that to your imagination. It could generally be the 2 or the 4. At least that's what I tend to do. And last but not least, the other so-called classical cadence is where you do the 5 and end with a 6. Okay, and each of these have some interesting names. 5 going to 1 is what we say as the authentic or the perfect cadence. It's called different things in classical music, in pop, jazz, they call it different things, but these are words for it. 4 going to 1 is generally called the plagal cadence or the amen cadence, which is used a lot in gospel music and hymns. The 2 going to the 5, the fact that it ends on the 5, they call it the half cadence for some reasons. And the lastly 5 going to 6, we call it the deceptive cadence. At least that's one name for it. Okay, so that's how the deal works. So you have authentic, plagal, half and deceptive. So if you think about it, you can build an entire chord progression, or even a chord progression is a small way to look at a song, right? You should look at a song and say, okay, I want to build a verse. Why chord progressions? Let's build the whole verse now. So a verse will be a bunch of chords, like many chords going all over the place. So I could analyze my verse or tell myself I want to make a verse by doing authentic. Then what shall we do next? We'll do deceptive at the third round and end with a half cadence so that it kind of pulls back. So this is the information, and we do this a lot in our theory classes. We do this as an exercise and then we just brainstorm and everyone composes a melody and we kind of take it forward like that. Now this, poetically, if you think of yourself as a poet, this is a poem in an AABC writing structure, lyrically writing structure, or the rhyming, or whatever we call it. I'm nowhere close to being a poet writer, but you get the idea. See, even for blues, you have it in a blues 12-bar poetic framework, you could say. Come on, baby, don't you wanna go? Come on, baby, don't you wanna go back to that same old place, sweet home Chicago? This is like always your answer, your response. This is your repeat of the call. So if I have to build authentic, deceptive, half on the G major scale, what's going to happen? Authentic is 5 going to 1. That's your D to G. D to G once more. Then I want to deceive the ear of the listener, as it's called there. So D to E minor, and then let's do an A minor just to bring in another minor, and then we end on the dominant chord. That's your half. So let's see if this should be the verse of my song, which is a combo of cadences. And then you use this, you build some stuff there, and see how that can lead you to a chorus, which is the second part. Or maybe this is the chorus, and then that could take you to a verse. Generally, when you write music, it follows a fairly poetic model, if you think about it, because music has words, lyrics. So people do write stuff down, and they are thinking in that sense. Then it has to rhythmically match. So there's a lot of words, there's rhythm, rhyming, the language. So chords really bring that all together. So if I bring this on G, just play the chords, then we'll try a tune. That was the entire sequence. So I started with D to G, repeated. It's a variation. E minor. Da 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 da. La da 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 da. La da 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 da. As some of you can probably hear and make out, he's inspired by so many songs by singing this, and maybe a couple of them already sound quite familiar to you. So you see, it's not very language dependent. None of this stuff is culture, language. This one is Bollywood, that one is some other wood kind of a thing. It's not really related to any of this stuff. It's the physics of all this. It's the core ingredients which can make up any kind of dish which suits your cuisine, the way you wish to cook it. So this is an introduction to cadences, and there are a lot of lessons which take things even more forward. You should definitely type cadences on YouTube. You'll get a lot of stuff, and the notes are also there which you could consider getting an access to. There are some cadences which are really cool. Like for example, we have a 6 flat going to 7 flat and then going to 1. Remember what I told you earlier, you can go out of scale as well because we are in the key of G. We are not committing to a scale of G major. So what is the 6 flat, 7 flat and this thing? This will be G major, the 1. Then what is its this thing? 6 flat, F and G. Right. So let's say I'm playing, this is a song I'm sure which will not be taken down by the YouTube people. So you go, so if I do, how I wonder what you are, I could do that. How I wonder what you are. How I wonder. So I'll just break just that section. How I wonder what you are. What did I do there? I did. The traditional chords would have been, how I wonder what you are. So I could play with this. So how I wonder what you are. So I could add this spice. So this is what at least I call, because I have not found these names in classical music textbooks. I just use names like this: epic cadence, then brave cadence, forbidden cadence. I have forbidden cadence I've done a lesson on, not to make fun of the chord progression, but I think it's overused. So yeah, it's a forbidden cadence. They all use it, so probably don't use it, right? Yeah, I'll just come to some questions. I see a lot of questions. I'm coming to that very shortly. So if I just end Twinkle Twinkle like this with the alternate ending, twinkle twinkle little star, I wonder what you are. Da 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 do do do. La da 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 do 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 do. Almost feels like it came from another rag and then sort of just went outside, came back into the major. So that's some serious power right there. So these are cadences. So cadences allow you to connect various things together. Okay, I just have a few a few interesting topics just to give some food for thought, and then we're pretty much done. But before I do, it may be nice to look at a couple of questions. If anyone has a few questions, please shoot them out. Yeah, Venkatesh, could you go ahead? If you can ask your question, it'll be great.
Hi, sir.
Hi.
Thanks for that.
Go ahead.
The epic cadence, it sounded a lot like "Kiss from a Rose."
Yeah, it
by
did.
Sia.
It did. Yeah.
So that's what he uses, is it?
Yeah, of course. Kiss from a Rose, he uses it. Then he uses what else? How many songs use? So many songs use it. Almost every rock song. Most of the rock songs use it. So yes. Yeah, that's all I think I can sing of it. But anyway, yeah. Yeah, any other? Sham, could you please ask your question if possible? Yeah. Oh, I've unmuted you. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, hey Jason. So my question was when you play Twinkle Twinkle, so we generally tend to pick the chords from the same scale as, like, if it's the major scale, then we tend to pick the chords from the major scale.
Yeah.
So my question was, how do you play the same melody from the major scale but yet support it with the chords from a with a different chord that's out of the scale? I think that's what you showed it through the epic cadence.
Yeah, so it really it's very melody dependent. So the whole story is very melody dependent. So if you take let's say the tune G G D D E E D C C B B A A G, and if the rhythm pattern is the usual rhythm pattern, I don't see it being any different than this. That's the rhythm framework, no? So if we have to build our chords, how I wonder. Now let's say I want to add a plagal cadence here. So what you do is you say, okay, what's the plagal? 4 going to 1. What's the 4 going to 1? That would be C going to G. But what you could also end up doing is, what if you do a C minor going to G, which is like a borrowed chord. We call this a borrowed chord. You've borrowed it from the parallel minor scale or the G. G minor scale, exactly. So if I check this out. How I wonder what you are, or how I wonder what you are. I did not change my tune. Tune is the same. Or even how I wonder what you are. So I brought in that seal progression, if you want to call it that, and it works. I didn't touch my melody. Same melody. Now in the event that it sounds a bit funny, you could alter 1 or 2 intervals. So let's say the or the 6 got flattened or sharpened or something. Maybe then you have to respell the melody. You have to change the melody. Right? So that will be more like you're transposing to a key. Like if you were to let's say do verses. Now I've moved the whole thing from G major to the whole deal to that. Yeah. A request to the guys on YouTube, please hang around for a little bit longer. Thanks for watching, first of all, because there are a lot of questions and I want to answer some of them. There's some really good questions on YouTube and here. So yeah, thanks for your question. I hope that made sense. Jayant, you're here on the call. Would you like to ask the question?
Yeah, Jason, I have actually asked it on chat. So just the question is actually when we are using that 7th chord, so we are using 4 keys on the while playing the chord. So, do we use this while playing arpeggios kind of pattern or any other pattern, or we use them as a block chord only, all played together?
That's a very good question. See, seventh chords, I'll just give you a quick talk about it. See, if I play G major 7th and if I play it like an arpeggio, with all its inversion, a lot of these 7th chords, I guess that's what you're saying, a lot of the 7th chords seem to sound very different when you invert them. But if the bass is G, like if you're playing a G7th and if the bass is G, it tends to always kind of resonate well. It's not going to, like a romantic chord is not going to start sounding like a horror movie chord, or it's not going to change so much. So if it is like a very emotional chord, it will stay that way. So inversions will help, arpeggios will help, the pattern you play it will help. See, if I play you a chord like, I mean, now it's more like a dance song, so rhythm takes over. So music, remember in this class we are talking about harmony and chords, but rhythm is a huge force as well, which we'll definitely leave for another topic. But all these forces coming together is what creates music. Right? I'm just going to take a couple of the YouTube chats. Can we repeat a cadence a few times while we stay in the same tune chord? Yeah, I mean, that's what I just showed you, right? So take a song like Twinkle Twinkle Little Star. It's the ideal song. Another thing you want to check out is I'm going to be doing like this Instagram challenge very shortly, where I'm going to play a ridiculously simple melody. I forgot the melody. It was so simple. Something like that was the tune. So I'm going to make a video on this on YouTube. Stay tuned for that. Subscribe if you haven't already. And I'll show you how you can play so many cadences, like at least 20 different cadences with, and it'll entertain you hopefully for like 3-4 minutes for a whole song, which is the length of a song, isn't it? Yeah. So it's very, very powerful. The tool is really powerful if you learn all the aspects. So music theory is by no means something serious. So that's one thing I think books and certain individuals put inside music students' heads. You know, everyone wants to just start playing the piano. But what is the point of playing the piano when you don't know what to play, what it means, what it feels like, what it can do, how to take that on an adventure? You know, it's like someone teaches you how to shoot in some archery school or whatever, but then suddenly there's a zombie apocalypse or something, and you have to deal with that. So you have to adapt. So music is all about stories. Who's the actor? What is the purpose? Where is this on? Is it even on planet Earth to begin with, this particular story you're trying to tell? Because it is an art form, so you can talk about anything you want, really. Okay, I'm just going to take Amol's question if you're there, Amol. Okay, he asks.
Jason, actually, Sri has asked that. He has also written. Yeah, the question is asked by Sri.
Great. Okay. Sham has asked, can a progression resolve with all being 7th chords? Yeah, of course. I mean, you can do the circle of fifths. You can do even a jazz 2-5-1 progression. That they do this very often. You can do a 2 minor 7th, going to a 5 dominant 7th, going to a 1 major 7th. These are all 7th chords. You can even go to minor 7th flat 5, going to 5-7 flat in the 9. So you're adding one more note and then go to minor. These sound really beautiful. Like, for example, that's the minor version. And so on. Okay, guys, thanks a ton for sticking around for this. I'm just going to check out. There are a lot of questions on YouTube. Unfortunately, I don't have that much time. We've pretty much run out of time. But yeah. when playing 7th, 11th, 13th chords, do we need to divide them between two hands? How in the real world are these chords played? Yeah, that's a very good question. So if you think about it, if you take a 9th chord like this one, C dominant with the 9th, you can't play it with one hand, at least I can't. So you develop a voicing strategy. So let's say you take the blues, C7th, and you just can get away with it with an E and a B flat and add the 9th and forget the G. So what did I do there? I did a 7 flat, 3 and a 13. So you knock off a few and then play the bass note, the root note of the chord. And yeah, that's a way to voice your chords. Definitely more on that later, guys. Right, so let's just recap what we've done so that all the concepts are sort of understood by you folks. So we first built, I hope I've told you the way to structure your chord learning. Write the key, write the scale in a neat round circle, write the available chords, this is very important, and your key, major, minor. After you do that stuff, if you need to, you can write down your 7th chords, which are very important. These are 4-note chords. Then you look at your chords from the perspective of functional harmony. So here it was only classifying the chords by emotion and by title. That's it. Like for example, major is happy, minor is sad, diminished is rather scary. So you're classifying it by that. When you do functional harmony, you're doing it more by the purpose or the meaning of the chord. This is unstable, it wants to go there, like that. So you build chord progressions. Every technique we learned today can help you build serious progressions. And last but not least, we've done something else as well. Cadences, I've given you 4 of the usual ones we use in classical, in pop and whatnot. You can use that. And then we looked at a few other exploring things. I tackled some of your questions. And definitely there are 2 topics, secondary dominance and borrowed chords, which are very interesting, but I think it will do justice if I do another live where we just talk about that. We assume that we all know the chords of a scale. We just write all that down. I won't teach that anymore. And then we'll be like, okay, how do I really leave the scale? In what ways can I leave the scale for whichever melody? We'll even probably take an example of a melody. And yeah, that's about it, guys. Thanks a ton for being part of this class. A lot of the stuff is there on YouTube. There are a lot of detailed lessons there. You'll find some of the notes on Patreon. Actually, most of the notes in the past two odd years, at least since the pandemic, we've been using Patreon for all our notes. Notation will be there. MIDI will be there. Some people ask for MIDI. So what MIDI files are is it's just a digital information system. So you download a tiny file like a Word document and you import it into a MIDI player like a Synthesia, which gives you the notes. It shows you what everyone is playing and whatever else. So that's one way of learning. So all that stuff is available on Patreon. The subscriptions are about $5 a month, and do consider it if you can. And at our school, we teach quite a few instruments: piano, vocals, guitar, bass, drums, Hindustani vocals as well. So if anyone is interested, if you have a friend, family member, or if you are interested at whichever skill level, you can go to nathanielschool.com and check it out. And our courses are available. Could fill up a form, let us know what you want to learn, and we'll figure out what we can do best. Right, guys, thanks a ton. Good night or good morning or good evening from wherever you are, and catch you soon. Thanks a ton for watching.
Thank you so much, Jason.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jason.
Bye.
Thank you, sir.
Bye. Bye. Take care, guys. Bye.
Thanks, Jason.
Thank you. Bye.